When I met Haley, I thought she was the perfect mix of smart, funny, and effortlessly cool. She had this way of making people feel like they were the most interesting person in the room, even when she barely knew them. I met her in my junior year of college, in an advanced business ethics course that most people dreaded. I was the quiet guy who always turned in assignments early, the one everyone came to for help before exams. Haley wasn't failing exactly, but she wasn't doing great either. She sat behind me for most of the semester, and one day after class she stopped me. She smiled and said she'd noticed how focused I was and asked if I'd mind studying together sometime. I was shocked. Girls like her didn't usually notice guys like me. Of course, I said yes. We started meeting up twice a week in the library, and at first it really was just studying. But soon we started talking about everything: our families, dreams, random life stuff. I started falling for her, hard. She laughed at my jokes, touched my arm when she talked, sent late-night texts just to say she couldn't sleep. I thought it was mutual. A month later, she suggested we make it official, and I couldn't believe my luck. My friends told me to be careful, that she was known for being a bit manipulative, but I brushed it off. They just didn't know her like I did. Then finals week rolled around, and she started getting more anxious. She said she was terrified of failing, that her parents would cut her off if she didn't keep her GPA up. She cried one night while we were studying, and I felt so bad for her. I promised I'd help her any way I could. That's when she asked me for something small, just to take a quick look at the test questions that one of our mutual friends had from last semester. I hesitated but agreed to help her study. It didn't feel wrong at the time. Then she got bolder. She asked if I could send her my answers before the exam, just as a reference. I told her I couldn't, but she said she trusted me and that she'd only look if she got stuck. I didn't realize it at the time, but she was already testing how far she could push me. The night before the exam, she was unusually sweet, calling me baby every other sentence, saying I was the smartest guy she knew. When she asked again for my answers, my better judgment evaporated. I sent them. But that night, something didn't sit right with me. I kept replaying everything in my head: the timing of her affection, how she always needed something whenever she got close to me. I couldn't sleep, and something inside me whispered that she didn't love me, not really. She loved what I could do for her. By the morning of the test, I had a sick feeling in my gut. I got to class early and saw her laughing with another guy. My stomach twisted when I heard her bragging about how she was set for the test because she had a little help. I didn't say anything, but something inside me snapped. I realized I wasn't her boyfriend, I was her safety net. The guy she leaned on to get by. I took my seat, opened the test, and stared at it. I knew every answer without thinking. But as I filled in the bubbles, an idea started forming in the back of my mind. It was impulsive, reckless, and absolutely unlike me. But I couldn't shake it. I changed a few of the answers, just enough to ruin the grade if someone copied exactly. During the break halfway through the test, I stepped out and sent her a message, pretending to be the supportive boyfriend, saying, "Don't worry, I've got the answers. Just check them fast." She replied with a heart emoji and said I was the best. I stared at that message for a long moment before putting my phone away. When the exam ended, she looked radiant, confident, like she already knew she'd aced it. She ran up, hugged me, said she couldn't have done it without me. I smiled and told her I was glad to help. But deep down, I knew I'd just flipped the script. For once, she was going to learn that you can't manipulate people forever without consequences. And the best part? She'd never suspect me. Because people like Haley don't think the quiet ones are capable of revenge. They think we'll always be there, waiting to be used again. But this time, she was wrong. The grades came out a week later, and I'll never forget the exact moment I saw them. I was in the library, same spot where Haley and I used to study, scrolling through the portal on my laptop. 95. A perfect grade except for one wrong answer I'd deliberately missed to keep things realistic. I should have been happy, but I wasn't looking for my grade, I was waiting for hers. I refreshed the page every few minutes until the notification appeared in our shared class group chat. Someone said, "Damn, Haley bombed that test." My stomach tightened, and I clicked over to the grading spreadsheet our professor had temporarily left visible. 42. Not a D, not even close. A straight-up fail. I stared at the number for a long moment, watching the screen blur as a strange mixture of satisfaction and guilt crawled up my spine. I didn't expect to feel good about it, but I also didn't expect the rush that came with knowing she had no idea it was my doing. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was her. "Did you get your grade?" she wrote. I said yeah. "How'd you do?" she asked. I paused before replying. "Pretty good. What about you?" Then came the flood of panicked messages. "I don't get it. I studied, I looked at everything, I even used the answers you gave me. How the hell did I fail?" I told her maybe the professor had changed the test format. She said, "He wouldn't do that, he never does that." I said, "Well, maybe he caught on to people using old tests." She didn't answer right away. When she finally did, it was short and sharp. "This sucks. My GPA's done. My parents are going to freak. I feel like I can't trust anyone." That line almost made me laugh. Couldn't trust anyone? The irony nearly knocked me over. I said something supportive like, "We'll figure it out," and she just replied with a thumbs up emoji. That was it. No heart, no sweet nickname, nothing. The silence after that was almost peaceful. But the next few days changed everything. She started avoiding me. At first, I thought maybe she was embarrassed. But then I saw her at the cafeteria, sitting with the same guy I'd seen her laughing with before the test. His name was Derek, a senior from her communications class. They were sitting close, her hand on his knee, her head tilted the way she used to look at me. I walked past them like I didn't care, but my chest burned. That night, she didn't text at all. The next morning, I saw that she'd removed the photos of us from her Instagram. No explanation, no breakup text, just gone. A week later, she blocked me. I wasn't angry anymore, I was fascinated. How easily she moved on, how quickly I'd been erased. But karma wasn't done with her yet. 2 weeks after that, I heard through a mutual friend that she'd gone to the professor to complain that her test had been graded wrong. The professor reviewed her answers in front of her, and apparently, it was brutal. My friend said he pointed out that every question she'd missed was a very specific type of error, the kind that showed she hadn't misunderstood the material, but had copied from someone who'd deliberately changed the right answers. She tried to deny it, but the professor wasn't stupid. He didn't accuse her outright, but he told her if she wanted to appeal the grade, he'd have to report the situation to the Academic Integrity Board. She dropped it immediately. The rumors spread fast. Suddenly, people were whispering that Haley had been caught cheating, that she'd tried to use someone else's answers. She never admitted anything, but her reputation took a hit. Her study buddies stopped hanging around. Even Derek started keeping his distance. I could see it in her eyes when I passed her on campus one day. She looked smaller somehow, not the confident girl who once ruled every room. She saw me too, and for a moment, there was this flicker of recognition. Like she wanted to say something but didn't know how. She gave me a weak smile and walked the other way. That was the last time we ever spoke. I thought that was the end of it. But life's funny. A few months later, I got an internship at a consulting firm in the city. Guess who else got one there too? Yeah, Haley. When I saw her name on the list during orientation, my heart skipped a beat. Not from excitement. From anticipation. I didn't know what was coming next, but I had a feeling the universe wasn't finished teaching her lessons, or maybe, I wasn't. The first day of the internship felt like déjà vu in all the worst ways. I walked into the glossy downtown office building, nervous but excited to finally start something that mattered. The company, Alvaron Consulting, was known for grooming interns into full-time analysts if they impressed the right people. It was my shot to prove I was more than just the quiet guy who helped others pass. And then I saw her. Haley. Sitting near the front of the orientation room, wearing a white blouse and a bright, fake smile that instantly transported me back to every manipulative grin she'd ever given me. My stomach twisted. She hadn't seen me yet, so I grabbed a seat on the opposite side of the room. I couldn't believe it. Out of hundreds of applicants, we both ended up here. The HR manager started the session, introducing team leaders and explaining how interns would be paired in small groups for projects. I didn't hear half of it. My focus was locked on Haley, wondering if she recognized any of the names, if she was aware that fate had just dropped us in the same arena again. At the end of the session, the assignments were posted on the screen. My eyes scanned the list until I saw it: Team C, Haley Collins and Ryan Porter. My name next to hers. I felt my chest tighten. I almost laughed out loud. Of course. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. She turned her head when she saw it too, her eyes widening slightly before she caught herself and smiled like she wasn't bothered. But I saw it, the flash of panic, the realization. She hadn't forgotten me. She just hoped I wouldn't still care. When we met later that afternoon in our assigned workspace, she acted polite, distant, overly professional. "Hey, Ryan, long time no see," she said with that carefully practiced friendliness. I nodded, pretending to be unfazed. "Yeah, guess we're teammates again." She smiled, tight-lipped, and said she was glad to have someone smart to work with. I almost laughed at that one. We started going through our project brief. It was a financial data analysis report for a new client. We'd have 3 weeks to prepare a presentation for the executives, and the top-performing team would get a recommendation letter from the director. It was a big deal. And just like before, I found myself doing most of the work while she hovered, pretending to contribute. The first few days, she sent cheerful check-ins and offered to handle slides or edit formatting. But when the real analysis started, the heavy Excel modeling, the research, she disappeared. Old habits die hard. I could feel the same pattern repeating itself. But this time, I wasn't going to play the fool. I let her think I didn't notice. I stayed polite, even helpful, sending her updates and drafts, letting her believe I was still that same naive guy. But inside, I was already planning something else. During the second week, she started showing up more. Not to help, but to get close again. She'd compliment me, linger by my desk, talk about how crazy it was that we ended up together again. She said she'd changed, that college had been rough for her after certain people turned against her. I knew she was fishing for sympathy, but I didn't bite. I kept things strictly about work, and that seemed to frustrate her. The old Haley liked control. She liked having power over people, especially me. One afternoon, we were in the conference room finalizing our data charts when she leaned in and said, "Ryan, you know we make a great team." "We always have." I just smiled and said, "Let's hope the directors think so too." The truth was, I'd already made a backup copy of everything: our reports, spreadsheets, presentation notes, but I'd edited the shared version she had access to. Just small tweaks at first, barely noticeable errors that could mess up calculations. If she tried to take credit or pull another stunt, I'd be ready. The final week arrived, and everyone was stressed. Haley was in full networking mode, flirting with the senior analysts, laughing too loud, trying to make everyone notice her. She barely mentioned me to anyone, and when she did, it was as if I were just a helpful background character. But behind closed doors, she started pushing me to hand her the full presentation early so she could review it. I told her I wasn't done, even though I was. I wanted to see how far she'd go. On the night before the presentation, I got a strange email. It was from her, but not sent to me alone. She'd CC'd the project coordinator and our department lead. In the message, she claimed she'd taken the initiative to finalize our report and was submitting it on behalf of our team. She attached the shared file, the one with all the wrong data I'd intentionally altered. My hands froze over the keyboard as I read it. She'd done it again. She'd used me to build something, then tried to pass it off as her own. But this time, the outcome was going to be very different. I didn't reply. I let her think she'd gotten away with it. The next morning, during the presentation session, Haley walked up to the front of the boardroom in her pristine white blouse, radiating confidence. She started talking through the slides, referencing our findings, and I sat quietly beside her, watching as she sold the story like it was her own. But then the director asked a question, one that required understanding of the underlying data model. She froze, stammered, tried to deflect. The director frowned and asked me instead. I answered clearly, referencing the corrected data I had on my private drive. Haley's face drained of color as she realized her version was full of holes. The more I spoke, the more obvious it became who had done the real work. The director thanked me afterward and told me to email him the accurate version for review. When we left the room, Haley didn't say a word. She just stared at me like she'd seen a ghost. And maybe she had. Because this time, I wasn't her safety net. I was the person she underestimated twice, and that was her biggest mistake. After that presentation, everything between me and Haley changed. The air around us became electric but cold, like static before a storm. She stopped pretending to be friendly, and instead, there was this forced politeness, a smile that didn't reach her eyes whenever she passed me in the hallway. Everyone in the office could sense the tension between us. The director emailed me later that day, thanking me for saving the presentation and mentioning how impressed he was by how calmly I handled things. He even CC'd the senior partner. Haley wasn't copied on that message, and I knew that must have burned. Over the next few days, whispers started floating around. People talked about how she tried to submit the project early without permission, how her version had major calculation errors, and how I'd fixed it just in time. I didn't spread any rumors, I didn't need to. The truth was already doing that for me. She'd built her reputation on charm and confidence, but those things crumble fast when people start questioning your competence. By the second week, she was quieter during meetings, stopped joining group lunches, and her once perfect smile looked forced and tired. I could tell she was unraveling. I should have felt bad, but I didn't. Not this time. For once, she was feeling what she made me feel, small, invisible, like a placeholder for someone else's success. The irony was poetic. But then, something unexpected happened. She came up to me after work one night, her voice soft and her eyes puffy, like she'd been crying. "Can we talk?" she asked. I agreed, mostly out of curiosity. We ended up in the coffee shop across the street, sitting in awkward silence until she finally spoke. She said she knew she messed up, that she'd been trying to prove herself and had made bad decisions. She said she didn't mean to hurt me back in college, that she was young and stupid, and that she'd always respected how smart I was. I sat there listening, unsure if any of it was genuine or just another performance. Then she said something that caught me off guard. "Ryan, I know what I did was wrong, but I'm scared. People here are starting to talk, and if I lose this internship, I'm done. Please, just don't make things worse for me." I stared at her for a long moment. She wasn't apologizing because she regretted what she'd done, she was apologizing because she was losing control. I told her I wasn't out to ruin her life, but that trust isn't something you can rebuild after using someone. She nodded, pretending to understand, then left. I thought that was the end of it. But I underestimated her again. The next morning, I walked into the office to find the HR manager waiting near my desk. She asked if I could come with her to the conference room. Inside were the project director and another senior staff member. My stomach sank. They said they'd received a complaint. Apparently, someone had accused me of sabotaging our shared work by altering the data before submission. My pulse spiked. I didn't have to ask who made the accusation. They said Haley had come forward claiming that I'd intentionally misled her, that I'd provided her with incorrect figures and then tried to make her look incompetent in front of the team. I almost laughed at how perfectly twisted it was. She'd flipped the story. The director looked serious but said they just wanted to hear my side. So I laid everything out, the email where she submitted the file early without authorization, the timeline of our communications, the backup copies of the correct and incorrect data. I even showed the metadata timestamps proving she'd accessed and edited the shared document before sending it to management. The room went silent. The HR manager asked me to forward everything, which I did right then. 10 minutes later, they thanked me for my honesty and said they'd review the case. I left that room shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I'd nearly fallen into her trap again. By the end of the day, they called me back in and told me the issue had been resolved. I was in the clear. Haley, however, had been asked to conclude her internship early. It wasn't an official firing, but everyone knew what that meant. When I passed her desk, it was already half empty. She didn't look at me. She just sat there, staring blankly at her computer screen while security waited nearby to escort her out. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. Watching her go was surreal. For so long, she'd been this shadow in my life, someone who represented everything fake and unfair, and now she was just gone. That night, I got a message from an unknown number. It was her. One line, "You still don't know what you've done." I stared at it for a long time, trying to figure out if it was a threat, a warning, or a confession. I didn't reply. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the last I'd hear from her. People like Haley don't fade quietly, they find new ways to twist the story. And I had a feeling she was already working on her next one. I didn't hear from Haley for almost 3 months after she was dismissed. Life moved on fast. I finished the internship with glowing recommendations, landed a full-time offer from the firm, and even started seeing someone new, a graphic designer named Emily who actually listened when I talked and didn't treat every interaction like a transaction. Things were good, peaceful even, and for the first time in years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I thought the whole chapter with Haley was closed for good. Then one Monday morning, everything changed again. I was sitting in the office when my manager called me into his office, his expression unreadable. He told me there had been a situation. Apparently, someone had been spreading rumors online that I'd sabotaged a fellow intern's career, that I was manipulative, toxic, and had ruined her future out of spite. My name wasn't directly mentioned in the post, but the details were specific enough that anyone from the internship program could piece it together. The post was on a professional networking site, written as a vague career warning story by someone using a fake name, but it didn't take a genius to realize who wrote it. I read it myself later that night, my hands shaking. She'd painted herself as the victim, claiming she'd been targeted by a jealous ex who set her up to fail. She said he'd gaslit her, tricked her into trusting him, and then used her mistakes to destroy her reputation. The comments were full of sympathy. People called her brave. Others warned about toxic men in corporate environments. I felt sick. She hadn't just tried to rewrite the story, she'd done it in a way that made her look like the hero. I debated whether to confront her, but I knew that would only feed her narrative. So instead, I documented everything, screenshots, timestamps, emails, all of it, and sent them privately to HR along with a short message, for your awareness, in case anything comes up. My manager thanked me for handling it professionally. They told me they knew the truth and that her claims had no credibility. Still, the whole thing rattled me. I started seeing her name pop up again, this time in small freelance circles, always tied to drama or complaints. She was trying to rebuild her reputation, but every new connection she made seemed to fall apart within weeks. Eventually, even online, she started to fade into the background. Meanwhile, I focused on my work, got promoted faster than expected, and quietly built the life I'd always wanted. But no matter how much time passed, I couldn't forget her completely. Not because I missed her, but because she'd taught me something I couldn't unlearn, that manipulation doesn't always look evil. Sometimes it wears a smile, says all the right things, and thanks you while it's sinking the knife in. I thought that would be the end of her influence in my life, but a year later, fate decided to throw one last twist. I was attending a networking event downtown for young professionals, one of those mixer nights where everyone trades business cards and small talk. I was grabbing a drink when I heard my name. I turned, and there she was. Haley. Her hair was shorter, darker, and she looked different, tired, older somehow, but still carried that same calculated charm. She smiled like nothing had ever happened and said, "Ryan. Wow. Long time." I forced a polite smile and said, "Yeah, it's been a while." She told me she'd moved to another city for work but was still in consulting. Her voice wavered slightly, betraying the confidence she was trying to project. Then she said something that stopped me cold. "You know, I still don't understand why you did what you did." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" She looked me dead in the eye and said, You could have just told me you didn't want to help instead of setting me up. You didn't have to make me fail. There it was, the truth. She still had no idea it was me. After everything, after the rumors, the firing, the fallout, she still believed I'd been an innocent bystander in her own downfall. My silence had worked better than any revenge ever could. I just smiled and said, "Guess some lessons teach themselves." She looked confused, like she couldn't decide whether I was admitting something or just being cryptic. She laughed nervously and said, "Well, I hope you're doing well." I told her I was, that things had turned out great, and wished her luck. Then I walked away. As I left the building, I couldn't help but laugh quietly to myself. After all this time, she still didn't know. She didn't know that the test she'd failed, the internship she'd lost, the cracks in her carefully built world, all of it started the moment she decided to use me. I never exposed her. I never told anyone. I never needed to. Because the truth has a way of catching up with people like her eventually. Some people chase revenge. I learned it's better to let karma take its course, and sometimes, it moves through you quietly, without anyone ever realizing it. She still doesn't know it was me. And that's the sweetest part of all.